So this is where we've left off. We've got our arm situated, and I've gotten all the modifications out of the way where I've made little tweaks and bends to the arm to get it just where I need it. I have gone ahead and kind of re-bent this part here to allow the staff to kind of hang in that little section right here. I'm going to probably mess around with that some more though. I'm likely not using this for my stick or staff that's going to be stirring the cauldron. I'd like to have something that looks a little more organic than this. I just needed something right now just to kind of give me an idea of what I'm looking for, but this staff will not end up being what I use. I'll probably end up making something different. But step one was trying to figure out how are we going to get the arm to hold the staff, and step two now is how do we figure out how we're going to make the skeleton stand and not look like it's being supported by some sort of a frame. I've been doing a lot of thinking about this, and I think I'm going to abandon my original idea to use rebar up the legs. Why reinvent the wheel here? We have a stand. I like how this stand works. This is what came with this skeleton. And as you can see, this stand is just a metal rod, and that metal rod connects to this pipe right here, which threads into the spine at the bottom of the skeleton. So this pipe just slides over. Let's see if I can see where you can actually see where the pipe, yeah, you can see right here where the pipe is just sliding over this rod. So part of me is like, just stick with the rod that comes with the skeleton, but it's a little too short. Good news is that that dimension is about 3/8, and I just happen to have some 3/8 rebar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find a way to recreate this stand, because this stand is just a little too big and bulky. I really don't want to try and have to figure out a way to attach that. Instead, I'm going to come up with a different way to essentially remake this stand and get this skeleton at the height that I need. And what I'm going to be using to do that is this right here. So this is a flange. This is a 1/2-inch flange, and then I have a piece of 1/2-inch pipe that's going into this flange, and this fits perfectly around the 3/8 rebar. So over here, this is the board that I'm planning to use. I've already gone and attached a 2x4 and installed a flange. Now, I do have this piece of rebar here that I'm going to be using as my makeshift stand. I'm just going to go ahead and slide that in there. So you can see how the flange being attached to the board, and the board is screwed in on the other side of the plywood. But that flange is then secured to the board. The piece of 1/4-inch pipe is threaded into the flange, and then the 3/8 rebar fits beautifully inside there. There is a little bit of wiggle, there is a little bit of play, but we're gonna see if that's gonna be a problem or not. Right now, I think it should be okay. A little bit of movement won't be too terrible, but if it ends up being too much, well, we'll have to figure out how we're gonna address that later. So next we're going to see if we can get our skeleton over here and set him up and see how this is going to look. All right, so this actually worked out really well. As you can see, I've got the skeleton attached to the rebar in the pipe, and the pipe attached to the flange. And like I said, a little bit of movement. Nothing that I would say is going to be problematic. I mean, I expect there's going to be a little bit of movement, but again, as we continue to work our way through this build, we may just have to adjust. But I'm really happy with how this is looking. I might have to trim down this piece of rebar just because it might be just a tad too long, but I can just use the grinder for that. But this is how our skeleton is going to essentially stand. Get it from a different angle so you can kind of see how it's going to look. But this is the base, our Cauldron. Nothing here is attached. This is all just kind of just laying things out to get a visualization of where I'm going to have to put stuff. But it's coming together. You're starting to see, you know, how the project is going to look when it's done. Next big problem. For anybody that watched part 1, you remember as this was turning or spinning the Cauldron, what would happen is it would like to slowly veer off. My solution to remedy that is going to be the legs. The legs are going to help keep the pelvis from spinning. They're going to keep the skeleton standing in the position that I want it to. So what I've done, and this is off camera, so I do apologize, but these are the legs for our skeleton. Actually, let's see if I can. So here we have the legs for our skeleton, okay? And what I've done is I've just gone ahead and put one screw in. There's a screw right here, just to kind of hold this. I'm not sure exactly what pose I'm going to go for, but I do know this. I don't want the legs moving around, so that's why I put a screw in it. I still need to figure out how I'm going to attach this into the pelvis. Originally, there was some hardware that came with this. Let me actually see if I can find that. So originally, the legs, I've taken these apart, but when I first got them, they had this hardware that would sit here, and it would allow the leg to move and pivot in different directions. I don't want to have this showing though. I want to try and hide hardware, not show hardware. Plus, what I don't like about this is that it flops around too much. I need this to be rigid and solid, so I'm going to have to figure out a way to attach these legs to our skeleton and make them removable, but also I need to make sure that it's going to keep the skeleton from moving. So one of the first things I'm going to have to figure out is how do I get these two legs to attach to that skeleton. With skeletons like these, I primarily work with these types of skeletons. I know a lot of people use pose and stay skeletons. These are the anatomically correct skeletons you can get off of Amazon. And in the ones that I've had in the past, they've usually had something that comes out like a screw so that way you could attach this here into the pelvis. These don't have that. So I'm gonna have to see if I can come up with a better way, because originally I'm thinking, well, I could just put this in here and drive a screw in from this side, but the way the pelvis is designed and my limited tools, I don't have anything that would be able to get at an angle from that. My drill is too big, it gets in the way with the spine and the pelvis here. So coming at it from this angle, which would be the most sensible approach, isn't really going to work. I even thought about trying to come in down through here, but again, I don't have long enough bit attachments that'll allow me to do that. And I don't want it to look messy, and I'm afraid that it might if I do that. So another solution that I just thought about is borrow parts from another skeleton. So if you are anything like me, you probably have other skeletons laying around. And I just happen to have a skeleton out that I'm going to be recorpsing for a future video, so stay tuned for that. But this is one of the legs. Let's see, you guys see this in the frame? Yeah. Here's one of the legs from one of my skeletons that I'm recorpsing. I know it looks pretty corpse, and a lot of people are probably happy with how that looks now, which, don't get me wrong, I am too. But it can be better, and I'll show you when we get to the corpsing part of this project. But this leg, you can see they have these screws that are set into the bone, and this is an old skeleton. I mean, I think I bought these skeletons probably 15 years ago at this point, off of eBay when they used to cost like 80 bucks. Not anymore. So you can see this screw that comes out. It comes with this piece of hardware. Again, I'm not a fan of hardware. I'm not sure if I'm gonna go with this. I'd like to try and find something smaller because these do stick out like a sore thumb. But what we're gonna do just right now for proof of concept is we're going to take this leg, or these types of legs, we're gonna install it into our pelvis here, and we're gonna see what that looks like. So this should just line right up. Good, that's good. And then our other leg. So here is our other leg. Again, decent amount of corpsing, but this needs much, much, much more. We can do way better. Okay, let's see. Okay, so let's see how that looks. Pretty cool. I mean, the bones don't exactly match. They're slightly bigger. Just a slight difference in size. Nothing that I would say is cartoony about it. I actually kind of like it. I'm not worried about that it's a little thicker than the original legs. But maybe, I don't know, maybe I might still try and figure out a way to sink a threaded rod into here so that way I could set it up just like these legs. But why reinvent something if you can use something that you already have, right? So let's see, how do we look when we're attached? Yeah, whatever. Question right now is, does it want to turn? A little. I wonder if we could, you know what? Give him kind of like a Captain Morgan pose. That looks pretty neat. Oh yeah, I like this. This is what I was going for. So sorry for the crappy camera work. So we have our skeleton standing on our base. Let's try it out and see if it works. Oh, well, back to the drawing board for that, but it looks like it wanted to work for a second. Let me see if I can get this to work. Maybe my cauldron's too far away. I like that little bit of play that it has because of the armature and the arm. It's got a little bit of movement there, and I can see just a tiny bit of rocking back and forth in the body. I really like this, actually. And I think I like his little pose too, this sort of Captain Morgan thing we got going here. Okay. So part 1 was the arm, that's done. Part 2 is trying to stabilize the skeleton and get it to stand up. And that went a heck of a lot easier than I thought it was going to. So you all may not be using skeletons like this, but this is, if you do, this is a great way to get your skeleton to stand up. Typically, when I'm using, in my display, I'm using a fence post stake. Maybe that's not what this is called, but that's what I refer to this as, a metal fence post. And I hammer these into the ground, probably about a foot. And then I use pipe clamps that go around the spine of the skeleton and go around this metal stake. And that's how I usually keep my skeleton standing. But after learning this little trick, we might be going back to the drawing board with how we're going to be putting our skeletons on display this year. Very neat. So I've moved my skeleton over here to a different spot in my garage. Got everything essentially in place for where I think it needs to be. I got the center of the motor in the cauldron lined up with the top hand that's holding the staff. And we're gonna give it a full run here. So we're gonna do lights and everything and see how it all looks. I like the movement. One thing I'm gonna have to try and figure out is how to make that motor more quiet, because that's really loud and obnoxious. And there's gotta be a way to make that more quiet. Maybe wrap it in foam, not sure. Also thinking about what I'm gonna do for the top of the cauldron, if I wanna have it open like that, or if I've seen where people put like a lid almost on the top and it looks like they're actually stirring water and they have like bones and stuff floating out, sticking out the top of the water. I do like that idea. It escapes me right now who I saw do that on YouTube, but I've seen it, I think, in a couple of different tutorials. But I like that look. I think I might end up copying that with this build. Let's see how this is gonna look though with the lights out. So one thing I definitely notice is that the staff is, gonna have to be lighter in color, whatever I end up going with. It does seem to sort of disappear. So something that'd be a little lighter in color would help stick out a little bit more. Possibly I'm gonna need a couple additional spotlights, but not sure. It's hard to say because right now it looks like there's a lot of light being thrown off. That's just the way it looks on the camera. It's not that bright in person, and I know that once I cover those twinkling orange lights down at the bottom with foam to make it resemble coals and embers, I know that's going to take away a lot of that additional light. I do have extra lights inside the cauldron right now that are kind of like a reddish orangish color. We'll probably end up using those as part of the coals and then put a different color light inside the cauldron, maybe like a green or something like that. But this is what it's going to probably look like when it's set up at night. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more details put in there, all the corpsing on the skeleton, the details on the cauldron. But this is I think going to be the end of part 2. So stay tuned for part 3. And I think for part 3 we're going to probably start working on making sure we have everything laid out on that platform. So mark out where the cauldron is going to be, get that attached, and then once we have that laid out, and essentially I'm going to have bolts that'll bolt from underneath the plywood to the cauldron, so that way it'll just connect that way. And then once that's settled, I know where my skeleton is going to be. I know where my cauldron is going to be. We can start working on making the cauldron look more realistic. It needs a lot of work. It's very plastic looking. The rocks, obviously I've made the rocks out of foam, and those have just been carved with a hot wire, but I'm debating how I'm gonna go about weatherproofing those. I'm thinking maybe a fiberglass coating over them. I know it's a bit overkill, but I also know that that'll make it very, very durable, and that's what I'm going for. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next part. Thanks.